3. Ready to go.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's a brand new day.
Good morning.
Now prepare to experience the most outrageous man on radio.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
This is insane.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you once again. This is the title of the show, Take 3, Into the Mystic, Take 3, but this is actually like Take 4. The first time we started this show, it started out with like freezing up. The second time, partway through that, it froze up, and then it just stopped. It like the show was canceled, like on its own. The third attempt, it just wouldn't. I stopped it to do another attempt, and it kept, instead of stop streaming, it said it was still on, like as if it was streaming. I took a break. My coffee was a little strong. I kind of watered down my coffee, ran some more water through my coffee machine, took a little break, and here I am again. I'm streaming at over 2,700 kilobytes per second, 30 frames per second. As far as the quality is concerned. And let's just see what happens. Into the Mystic. And, it's funny. I put a chat up on here. The line from, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Into the Mystic. Take 3. Man, this show is something wacky's going on. So let's see if we can get this thing happening. It's crazy. Anyway.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And for those of you interested in the
Weekend weather.
As I reported once before, it's about 39 degrees outside here, and it's raining. Thunderstorms at 9 o'clock. I'll be upstairs emptying buckets by then. So that's your
Weekend weather.
I'm in the mid-Atlantic states, so if you're east of me, you can expect rain. It's probably heading your way. If you're south of me, it's a little bit warmer. If you're north of me, it's probably a little bit colder, and you'll probably get some snow. The forecast originally here was for rain and snow, but it's my luck, it's always rain. And I got a leaky roof, for those of you who aren't aware of that. Okay. Now to get back into this. I mean, it is very strange when you have 3 starts, technically 4 starts for a show. And no, I wasn't wearing eyeliner in that image. It just seemed, it's an effect that seemed to provoke the title of the show, Into the Mystic, right? You could imagine that you'd go to a dude like that, and he would be, telling you some things about your past, present, and future. Well, that's what I wanted to touch on. Some of the mystical things, but not necessarily not the G.G. Young, type of stuff. As much as, and not so much into the mysteries. Like, yesterday I was watching a podcast by Danica Patrick, and she was interviewing, it's from a couple days ago, Jimmy Corsetti. I think he has Bright Insights is his YouTube channel. Check them out. Check out her Danica Patrick's podcast. She's on YouTube, but I guess she has a podcast probably out there on podcast land too. She's good. She's a former race car driver. She has a really incredible mind, and she's well traveled, and she's into she knows her way around, like Egyptology and all that crazy stuff. And they were having a discussion about that and some other things. And I watched a good portion, almost the entire video, but it was getting late for me, so I didn't see the very end. I will finish that later, but I watched the lion's share of the podcast, video podcast, the video on YouTube. That said, they touched on some, the mysteries of how the ancients did this, that, the other. I dropped the name Gigi Young. Of course, she's into the very mystical and that whole other realm. It's like dark journalist is also into not only things that are mystical, but he also gets into things that what some people refer to as conspiracy theory type stuff, but in reality are just things that, people don't talk about, or when they do talk about it, there's always somebody to jump right out there and say, where's your tinfoil hat? And the idea is, and that's so taking all those individuals that are kind of almost interrelated, but not, related. The one thing in common is, and I just thought, Into the Mystic. And that title was also the title of a Van Morrison song, Into the Mystic, as well. So now that we got from there to here, let's take it.
Hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
Well, as you know, because you called in before, this is the fourth attempt at doing this program. And if this show does indeed cut out, I guess that'll be it. I don't think I'm going to go after a fifth. So I'll try to jump right into the topic and see where we go. There are so many mysteries out there. This is unscripted flow of consciousness, by the way, and things I said in the earlier ones that I've deleted. I've taken them down because they were just half shows, and they were like, my face was freezing, my voice was out of sync. I mean, YouTube was really messing with me. So far, so good. Anyway, there are so many things, when you talk about the Serapeum, that gets into that, that topic was touched on last night, or in the video, at least, that I was watching, Danica Patrick and Jimmy Corsetti's. And I've often talked about that. And in fact, I've had pictures of it up on previous shows. But, what was in those boxes? One thing is, how the heck did they get them there? Which is basically totally, you just makes no sense. And how did they move all those rocks? How did they build the pyramids? It's the same old stuff. How old is the Sphinx? Is it 36,000 years old? 72,000 years old? All that kind of stuff. These are mysteries. And the thing about it is the mystery schools, and, when you talk about the mystic, it's not only that are things like the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx and the Serapeum and some of these places located all over, even in Central South America and Asia and everywhere. I mean, all over this planet. Right here in the good old U.S. of A. Not only are these mysterious, how they were constructed, who lived there, who those people were, etc., but there's this mystical aspect to them that there seems to have been, mystical practices or things that we consider mystical or maybe magical, right? That whole line that, what we consider science today to someone who, in the past, they would consider it magic, right? Just as if we were to see something by a civilization far advanced ahead of us, we would consider that some sort of supernatural, or magical thing, just because we didn't understand the science behind it, right? But then again, what is science? And maybe that whole word science is, it's interesting how we've arrived at that word science. Now think about this for a second. There are more writings in what we would call recorded history. And recorded history is fairly short, when you think about it. You could go back, 6,000 years. You can go back to Göbekli Tepe and say, but I mean, we haven't, as of yet, there hasn't been enough digging done on that site to find any sort of clay jars with scrolls or anything like that. All we have at this point are images carved on, rocks, like frescoes or whatever. But we know we had a cataclysm approximately 12,000 years ago. Many of us believe that that's a recurring near extinction event, and that the time is nigh for that to occur again. And, are we aware of that? And that could mean, a lot of the earth changes that we're witnessing now on the planet, on the other planets, and on the sun itself. And maybe our own state of mind. How magnetism affects our brains. There's things that they can do. They can put things on your head and stimulate portions, in many cases with magnets, sometimes with electrical stimulation, and people can have what they consider a religious experience, or think that there's someone else in the room. They're blindfolded, and so imagine a situation as what's occurring right now on the planet Earth, where we have this weakening magnetic field, and so that there's a certain, say, stasis of humans, right? That you grew up, and that was, there was the equilibrium of your, what I call the android body, this strange thing with the bioelectric brain, with this outside consciousness, soul, mind, right? But that suddenly now this stasis, which that word may not be exactly the correct way, that's getting across to you. But what I'm trying to say is that there's a certain state in which you've become accustomed to, and that suddenly that state has changed. So you have these forces. We're comprised of billions of cells. In each of those cells, there's these mitochondria, these little motors. Our brain is a bioelectric brain, as I said, so that there's all of this, and of course electromagnetism. Electricity is deeply involved with magnetism. We're a electrical society. We're also a carbon-based society, but we'll watch yesterday's show and we'll talk about that. But with a diminishing magnetic field on the Earth, which is documented, in fact, there's a South Atlantic anomaly with the poles that seem to be on path for a pole shift right now. The magnetic South Pole's left Antarctica actually completely. That why wouldn't that affect us? And affect our brains the same way someone going, putting on one of these, helmets at some research institution that's testing, the brain activity and sensations and, what different stimulation can do and what that would bring about. And the question is then is someone says, and I get back to this concept of science. So the type of individual that would put this helmet on you and put you in a room in some university lab or somewhere would be considered a scientist, right? And that would be a scientific experiment. But then again, isn't that scientist just messing around with what someone else might call the mystical aspects of existence? In other words, the hard problem of consciousness, which I've spoken about in my book Codex, which isn't my latest book, is Then What, but the book prior to that was the book Codex. There's a picture of it here. Which case I also get into AI in that book, but we talk a little bit about that in Then What too. But that if the hard problem of consciousness, which is accepted by mainstream science now as a contemporary issue, an argument, people are trying, those neuroscientists who are saying that, consciousness, they can't figure out how does consciousness arise from the brain. In other words, and then there are those that say it's detached from the brain. So in other words, your consciousness is this existential thing, your soul, your mind, the way you perceive the world in the first person as you, right? When I say I, who am I, right? It's my consciousness. It's not my bioelectric brain. And there's yet to be any papers that definitively have come up with a theory that has been accepted by mainstream science, so to speak, that says, oh, yeah, okay, that's the theory of consciousness, right? It's an ongoing thing. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. It's an unsolved mystery. And so this scientist in a lab that's putting on some kind of headgear onto some student volunteer for some experiment, what's to say that stimulation, electromagnetic stimulation, isn't the same or reproducing the electromagnetic stimulation of the universe itself, that's the same forces that are present in the planets, through the sun in the cosmos. And so that the word science is what? And what is a scientist? You see what I mean? There are more writings, what we call modern science, which is only several hundred years old, technically, right? But yet there are thousands of years of writings of what we would consider mystical writings, right? Or what people call mythology or a religious text. They have to throw something else at it. They can't, because there's a lack of understanding. It's not hard science. So it has to be mythology. It has to be, these were religious beliefs, or that these things were temples, right? Every time they find a new structure, it's some kind of temple, as if everyone in the past, they spent all their time worshiping, right? Sun gods or something, right? It's idiotic. They had the exact same brains as we did. If you were able to be taken back in time, right? Like the way I, in yesterday's program where I showed, this image. If you were able to go through that time portal that we talked about yesterday briefly, and you ended up back, it's my cat. If you ended up back in time and you were to speak to somebody and you were able to talk the language of the time, but you were able to talk to a Sumerian or someone in India, right? Someone in Central or South America, and one of these ancient cultures in Southeast Asia. Apart from the language barrier, your brain and their brain would be exactly the same. In other words, as long as you weren't talking about current events, you would be able to be sitting somewhere, on some kind of bench or at seaside or by a waterfall, and you should be able to carry on a conversation about life existence, or you could be out at night looking up at the stars and talking about the wonder of the universe or something. See, they were no different than you or I. And so to ascribe everything they've written and, recorded as if they were some primitive people who didn't have, were inferior to us to the point that they were just sun worshipers or something strange like that. Do you see what I mean? That's the arrogance of the British colonialists, right? The conquistadors, the people that went out and discovered these people and these cultures, and they were amazed, and of course their eyes always lit up because their structures were far better than anything they had seen before, and they were in many cases clad with gold and all this stuff. And so they went to go to conquer these people, take their gold and women and whatever else. But in reality, those people were no different than you or I. And we don't think of it that way. And I do often, and I know other people do as well, but sometimes that's left out of the discussion, even when people talk about weird things like the Serapeum or the Sphinx or, the Mayans or the Sumerians or whomever, Vedic text, all of these things, and it's like, no, these were just people like you and me. And they had the same thought process as we have. They were basically, this humans, modern humans. They were modern humans. 6,000 years ago, there were modern humans. In fact, it's funny how anthropologists, they keep pushing back the dates, because they keep discovering or uncovering through archaeology, bones and remains of humans that clearly were similar, if not exactly the same, as us. We still don't have that missing link, so to speak. Which brings up another mystery is like, are we, and then that's the part that really drives so-called scientists crazy. The idea that we may well have been genetically altered through, by some alien or some outside force, Of course, one could also say God is an alien. I've said that before. In other words, you could, even in someone who is has strict religious beliefs, reading ancient religious texts, such as Genesis, but various other religious texts, same thing, creation stories, that they all talk about that. So if in effect God, whoever God is, God consciousness, the one, the cosmos, however we came into being, that these stories present this idea that there was some kind of meddling done there. There was a creation of man as man is today, man as in mankind. I'm not going to get into some kind of thing where I try to come up with 1,000 different descriptions, womankind, mankind, whatever. Okay, let's just go with the historical reference for now. So, it doesn't even go against religious beliefs. It's just a matter of semantics, I would say. What you want to say, how you want to say it. So that's the thing. So what's the difference between science and mysticism, right? Nothing. Nothing. And maybe that's the problem. Because, in a society today, like I was talking about yesterday, that our technology of the day seems to be so focused on communications technology. And when I say communications technology, it's not necessarily for us to better communicate information to one another, because people are so devoid of information, of the truth, right? When I think of information, I think of the truth, right? Understanding, learning, knowledge, right? That's what information is to me, knowledge, right? And what is knowledge? Knowledge is the truth, right? Not revisionist history, not some sort of, political banter, not red team versus blue team, politics, propaganda, indoctrination, conditioning, controlling, or like I was in the advertising business for a while, advertising, publishing, entertainment, and all those various things. You got to go back in my other videos to look at or read my books to find out, the adventures of one Tony Caravan. But that, these, the ideas that today we focus more on communications technology, such as, like I say, the Star Trek communicator, which if you look at it from the side is pretty much similar to the BlackBerry. Just like the original iMacs and stuff were pretty much copied from Star Trek, right? Sci-fi, right? That we don't really focus on the quality of life of the human being itself, right? We've lost, and I know I'm being repetitive from slightly from yesterday's show, but I have to, because this is an ongoing, continuing saga, really. But that people are dying unnecessarily from things that are preventable, such as heart diseases, type 2 diabetes, obesity, diabetes itself, kidney problems, all sorts of ailments that are basically caused by processed foods and just eating the wrong diets, and the manner in which our cities are established and how people work, and the idea that people spend the better part of the day, when the sun is shining, inside a building sitting still, right? And so they go to a gym to exercise, to keep their body in some those who can afford it or have the energy after a grueling day or a horrendous week of work, they go to a gym. But that's not natural. It's unnatural. And so we're dying on the magnitude of 40,000 people a week. If you look at CDC statistics, and you divide them by 52 weeks, if you look at the annual leading causes of death in the U.S. alone, it comes out to approximately 40,000 people die a week. And most of those deaths are preventable definitely, they are treatable, and that's how big pharma makes its money. But and could be curable or just ended if we weren't being force fed processed food and living the lifestyles that we're living. But instead, and this is this technological information age, and people are talking about, oh, we're going to go to Mars and all this stuff. And I'm like, we got it all backwards. Technology is a beautiful thing. I'm using it to communicate with you right now. But big tech, big pharma, big ag, right? Big finance. We should be focusing, you would imagine, considering we pay half, if you're working right now, over half of what you earn is being paid to the government, which I call the corporatocracy. Some people call it the technocracy. That at least some of that money might go to improving the quality of life of human beings. Instead, we learned that the average life expectancy over the past several years has dropped by a couple of years, 2 years, I believe, close to 2 years, 1.8 years or something like that. We also don't seem to be doing anything about, when you take the law enforcement statistics, and I mention this all the time, that it comes out to close to 2,000 people are murdered each week in the U.S., approximately. And most of those murders go unsolved. And that doesn't include all the horrendous crimes, right? That's just murder. It doesn't include assault and, I don't even want to get into the horrible words of the acts that criminals commit. And so science has not exactly been so successful, right? They give these prizes out to people, Nobel prizes for someone, has found some particle through the Hadron Collider, or, has discovered that this particular, neutron or whatever, or neutrino, or this, that, the other, blah, 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 right? But where's the Nobel Prize for the person that is, improve the quality of life for human beings? When I say quality of life, it's a holistic thing as well. So it's not just the fact of ending this ridiculous amount of 40,000. And remember, when I'm talking 40,000 people a week, I'm not talking about the plague that, has been here for the past, couple of years, the never-ending plague. No, that's not even included in these numbers. All right? That's added to it. And besides, it's a passing thing, no matter what anyone says. It came, it may still be here, but it's eventually going to go away. Okay? Just like other flus, right? There's all sorts of flus that we have out there. That's why people get flu shots every year. All right? No, I'm talking about things like heart disease. The reason people get stents, it's because of what they're eating, man. Right? You're getting kidney stones, like you get your gallbladder removed. All right? People are dying of, type 2 diabetes, losing limbs because they're diabetic, right? I mean, some of these things sound horrible. And what does this have to do with Into the Mystic? Well, the thing is that it's the mystic and the mystical aspects of life that are our only hope these days of longevity and happiness and finding peace, inner peace and calm. And so, the fact that those people who do survive are those that are able to meditate, right? And meditation could be, is no different than a prayer. Meditation is no different than just being calm. Meditation is nothing more than sitting on a rock looking out over over a hillside into a valley. Unfortunately, today, when you sit on a rock and look out over some rolling hills, you see a bunch of windmills, half of which have probably already broken down. And that's the point. What is science really doing? You know, we're getting better iPhones and better computers, and we're getting better chips that are going to help the cloud and technology for AI, algorithms that are taking over, and, you know, we've got chat bots for customer service, right? Computer, gaming. We have the metaverse to create these avatars to live in an unrealistic world when we're flesh and blood human beings with senses, 5 to 6 senses. We probably all have 6 senses. We're just not aware of the 6th sense, maybe even a 7th sense. But certainly the 6 senses that we do have, except with the exception of those who unfortunately suffer from certain handicaps, that these things are what make us human beings and allow us to experience this world and allow our consciousness through this body, this android body, this created body, somehow created, whether it's partially evolved and partially messed with, whatever. That's what makes us human. And so we have these eyes to see beauty. We have these ears to hear beautiful noise, right? We can speak and converse, express ourselves. We can feel and touch each other, and we can touch nature. We can taste the fruits of what this planet has to offer. We can breathe in, fresh air and, and the scents of flowers or other things that are pleasing to us. And why do we need to have imitation of life? So, I propose, when I talk about into the mystic, it's that it seems that we need to go into the mystic, right? I mean, I don't mean to be anti-science here, but maybe in a sense I do. There's too much of a focus on science, computer science. And one would say, well, you're utilizing computer science. Yes, I am. But why are we obsessed with it and taking it to, to levels beyond the human experience in order for it to take the place of human senses itself? Like, who wants to strap on a suit that will mimic senses when you could be naked with another human being and feel them completely and have full sensory experience? You see? So is it the idea that people were creating an anti-social society? So has the so-called, it's like the Patriot Act concept. They name these things that are the complete opposite of what they always are, right? So social media is clearly the should be called anti-social media. Because what it has done to us is it's taking away our social interaction. And people say, well, I don't know. Zoom is great or FaceTime is great. What are you talking about? Look at you. You're talking to people. Yeah, that's fine, right? They're tools. It's just like the wheel, right? Make the wheel a little bit better, refine it, but a wheel's a wheel. It's a tool to be used. No one wants to abandon the wheel. I don't want to abandon a computer. We invented the computer. And I don't mind it being tweaked. If you saw what happened the first 3 takes of this show, whether it was intentional by, YouTube shadow banning me or whatever, or the weather or who knows what, the point is, yes, I would like a more reliable computer, a more reliable internet, a clearer picture, a better sounding voice, etc. However, that said, I don't want the computer to replace me meeting an individual face to face and my having an interaction with a human being face to face. It's like the phone. I know a lot of people are just in love with their smartphones, and they're in love with talking on the smartphone. And it was the same way with the telephone in general. But I don't like talking on the phone that much, right? Because it's just not real. It's just not like being in the room with somebody. So it's an imitation of a conversation. It's like video and FaceTime. But more so like VR or AR. It's an imitation of life. It's okay as a substitute, as something to use when you cannot be close to someone. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's the same with various technological breakthroughs. For someone who is handicapped, technology is a wonder that will allow someone to experience something that they can't because of a disability. In those instances, it truly is, it's miraculous in a sense. And I applaud those individuals and the teams of people and the companies that do that and have given, people who have disabilities and handicaps an ability to participate in life in a way that they couldn't before. But in general, to replace, human existence, human sensations, with artificial intelligence, right? Augmented reality, imitation of life, a metaverse, or science, computer science, is absurd. Because ultimately, it's the mystical. It's the hard problem of conscious is mystical. It's not really science. That question isn't a question for scientists. It's a question for mystics. And for some people, they would say, mystics, what do you mean? I mean people that have an open mind to the idea, to the concept of consciousness being detached, an existential part of this body that has 5, 6, maybe 7 senses, as I say, which is a mind blower, I know, for some people. But it's something that's existential to your bioelectric brain and this android created body with billions of cells, with little motors, mitochondria in them, all operating, right? I mean, that's mystic. It's mystical. It's magical in a sense, our existence. And so this idea that science through transhumanism or science, through some new chip or something, is going to create a better machine, human machine, right? Build a better mousetrap, right? Is absurd. And it's a relentless pursuit. It's like when I talk, it's man of La Mancha, right? It's it's crazy. It's craziness, right? Because there's nothing like being human. Nothing like it. And we need to move more towards the mystic and less towards what people are calling science today. Science is young compared to the history of humanity. At least the last 12,000 years that we know of. This last cycle of life before we had that near extinction event. You could call it the Younger Dryas period if you want, right? Or you could call it the micronova. But whatever the case may be, there clearly was a global extinction event that can be, proven through everything from archaeological digs to ice core samples to, when through the stomachs of woolly mammoths, right, that still have undigested food in them. All right, we know that this happened. We know, and it seems and it appears through archaeology and through study, and there are many scientific papers in peer-reviewed journals supporting this, that these occurrences seem to happen with fairly regularity every 12,000 years or so. Now, you would think that a people, us, that are literally standing on the precipice of a near extinction event, because the 12,000 year cycle is about now, right? And if for the sake of it, I scare people away sometimes when I talk about this stuff, but it is science, for those who have to hear the word science, that it's scientific fact that the woolly mammoth is no longer here. The saber-toothed tiger is no longer here. I think it was a snub-nosed bear, the giant bear in North America, is no longer here. They were extinct. In the last occurrence of this event. Now, whether this event is a micronova, like if you go to Ben Davidson's Suspicious Observers, or you watch Doug Vogt, Diehold Foundation, wherever, whatever you want to look at, or whether you are into Randall Carlson talking about the Younger Dryas period and maybe some comet or asteroid that split up and part hit Greenland and the other part hit western part of the U.S., North America or something. It doesn't matter. Nonetheless, this happened. This occurred. Okay? And there seems to be these occurrences occur with regularity. So think about that. The concept of that. That through so-called peer-reviewed scientific papers, through archaeological digs, right? The study of anthropology, right? Ice core samples, right? Astrophysics, even. What happens in our solar system, the sun's cycles, solar cycles, the weakening magnetic field, the poles shifting, the fact that the magnetic South Pole has left Antarctica, that the magnetic North Pole is headed towards Siberia, and it looks like we're heading towards a pole shift. We have no idea what that could possibly do. Is that affecting the birds, migratory patterns? And then, and what is science doing? And, what are you what are the people, the powers that be, the so-called like leaders, the people that people have this cult of personality around, the people that you pay half your year's salary to, more or less, these taxes go to. And what are they doing? Right? Trying to profit on wars off while 40,000 people a week die of dietary things produced by perhaps processed foods and things the FDA, our government agencies, approve, put on the shelves. They sell weed killers and bug sprays are available right now in box stores that have already had lawsuit settlements because they contain carcinogens, but they're still for sale. The cost of doing business is a settlement now. I no longer have a television, service. I just, why would I? But I keep abreast of the news and information of the day, of the time. And when I did have a television and I would put it on to watch the weather or something weird like that, what I see, commercials by law firms that had lawsuits about certain drugs or things that the FDA approved. And I keep thinking to myself and that was the lion's share of the commercials. And then there would be a commercial for another drug. And I say, well, why aren't these people at the FDA put behind bars? Why don't they disband that agency and come up with something different? If there's so many lawsuits, right? But that. That's fact. That's not fantasy. Well, anyone who turns on a television for just a handful of commercial breaks is going to see some advertisement is going to come on from a law firm talking about a settlement. And if it's not about some drug that caused some serious complications or death, it's going to be about a product that is probably still on the shelf. High fructose corn syrup. Look at the contents in the processed foods you eat. Carbs and sugars. The daily values that they set forth are so off the charts compared to what would be healthy. I noticed a change in my lifestyle, my health, just by cutting out carbs and sugars. And I notice complications I have the moment I have something. Accidentally, I was eating what I thought were healthy sugars, whole grain, oats, and things like that. And I wasn't reading the box really, and I have to admit my own stupidity because I was getting delivery through a thing called Instacart. They would deliver to my door. And so I was looking and I would see whole grain oats, non-GMO, gluten-free, all natural ingredients, right? That type of thing. And so I'm eating this stuff and I'm thinking, hey, this is good. And I'm putting blueberries on it. I'm thinking, wow, what a healthy breakfast I'm having. Even having some kind of like coconut alternative to milk and stuff. Like coconut almond milk. I was doing that for like a month or two. And I was wondering why I was still having these pains and stuff. I wasn't feeling right, and I wasn't losing weight or anything like that. And I started reading the boxes of these things. And then I looked at them, and they were like 35, 40 grams of carbs, all these added sugars, like 12 grams of added sugars. It's like when you see something that says fat-free or low fat. Well, what they do is, in order to compensate for it being low in fat, they pump up the sugar level. So, they give you some sweetener instead of fat. It's crazy. What does that have to do with being, into the mystic? Well, my idea is this. I think that, I think it really is game over, the way my hat says and I have up there on the screen. And I know everything you know, is a bold statement when I say everything you know is wrong. It's mostly everything you know is wrong. But it's a kind of a statement that's like, almost. And certainly you don't know what you don't know. Because we're not getting the truth. And that's what information is about. But the focus is on information technology. It's communications technology. Chips to improve AI in the cloud. Things like that. There's some really crazy chips coming out. I mean, besides the Apple Ultra chip, I saw there's an NVIDIA chip that's coming out in the third quarter this year that's like a mind blower. And that's basically designed for cloud computing. And it'll probably usher in what we call GPT-4. Right now, AI is GPT-3. And again, if you read my book Codex, I have a conversation in there, brief conversation with a GPT-3 AI. And it's quite interesting. But to take the concept of GPT-4 is being able to really talk to a computer in a manner in which you might not know you're actually talking to a computer. GPT-3 at certain times seems that way, the way it's been coded, and the access that it has to certain things, right? Remember, a cloud computing AI is only, its knowledge base is whatever it can draw on. So if it draws on the internet in general, then that's its database. And obviously it can function at, a rate so fast that it can respond in real time to you in a conversation. And so when you have a conversation about, say, physics with it, it's very stimulating. But if you have a conversation about certain other things, it falls short. And you certainly wouldn't want to have a conversation about some political issue or anything weird like that, though I wouldn't want to have those conversations with even a human being. Because in that case, it would have to resort to things like Wikipedia, or sites that have that kind of content that are basically, divisive sites that have, that are pushing a certain narrative. And that's a problem we have today. We waste too much time trying to divide one another and deal with narratives than we do dealing with life itself. And I guess that's my main point, that life is a mystical experience. Life is a mystery, right? And I don't know if I'm starting, as time progresses, I'm starting to not believe in science. You see? See what I mean? Science is something that's come along recently. It's not that old. And its track record isn't that great. Because from a human standpoint, and particularly the past 50 years or 60 years, say. See, it started off nice. Technology, we were improving the quality of life. And I get into this yesterday. Yesterday was a pretty decent show. Watch it. I talk about some of these things, but not in this manner. But for a while, science was concerned with improving the human condition. I mean, it's horrible when you think about how much science is wasted on war, right? And weapons of war. And that even some of the things, including the internet and stuff, were developed by like DARPA, by basically the military. That's kind of scary in a sense. But science in the past 50, 60 years, say post the lunar landing type of thing, right? Once we had refrigerators that, didn't take an ice cube, like in Laurel and Hardy, they didn't have to carry an ice cube to the top of the stairs. Big block of ice, this big. By the time they got to the top of the stairs, it was the size of an ice cube, right? Or Three Stooges type of stuff. Three Stooges plumbing. No, once we basically focus science on improving the quality of life, right? Cars with seat belts, right? Refrigerators that no longer were putting a hole in the ozone atmosphere. Washers and dryers, to replace the wringer washer, right? Type of thing. Right? Heating systems, HVAC systems, right? With filtration. And even as I say today, in the U.S., Energy Star appliances and clean energy, that we don't realize that we actually do have some of the cleanest energy in the world in the U.S. And that most of our appliances, these computers and laptops and all these things, use such a minuscule amount of electricity. All right. But we're still dependent upon, certain things to produce that electricity. In other words, batteries, people who believe in purely electric are fine, except somebody's got to charge the battery. And the only way to charge the battery is, unfortunately, in this day and age, is through carbon-based fuels. And we are carbon-based beings. We're carbon-based life forms on a carbon-based civilization. That's another story, too. But, science. What is science really doing now? What is this obsession with computation? Well, the answer you'll hear from some people, they'll say is, well, as these supercomputers start to be activated and utilize these chips, they'll solve all of these problems for humanity. And robots will take the place of the menial tasks of humans to free up our time to what? Live some sort of utopian life? Is that what it's going to be? We already have that. First of all, we already live in a beautiful world. All you have to do is look back at some of my earlier videos where I had pictures, and I had Trey on the phone, the guy who took the pictures, who takes pictures of sunsets oftentimes, or sunrises. I'm sorry, I always say that. Sunrises. Beautiful sunrises. And I could even bring one up. Yeah, here's one. I'm just looking for a space I have available on my computer. Let me just dig this out, because I have some of his sunrises here. You regular viewers will have seen some of these things before. Let me just find a nice one for you. A really nice one. Let's find something really sensationally beautiful. I mean, this isn't bad. Let's look at this. Let's get this out of the way. Let's put this up. A human experience. Now, do we need AI or AR or a better chip to experience that? No. Because, imagine being there. Several feet back, you took your shoes and socks off. So you're standing there at the water's edge with your literally toes in the sand and the water, right? On your feet. You're hearing the sound of the surf, the sound of those birds. You're smelling the fresh morning salt air, looking out on this beautiful sunrise, clouds in the distance, right? And say there's a warm, gentle breeze on your body. You're calm, and you're thinking, it's a beautiful day, and it's a beautiful world. And that's what I mean by the mystic, right? And that's even the mystery of life if you think about it. We live on this beautiful planet. Now, that's for someone who likes a seascape. Now, for some areas on both coasts, there might be out there, instead of seeing that sight, just back for a little bit further, you'd see a bunch of windmills there. Unnatural windmills that don't even produce enough electricity to charge our cars and heat our homes or run our air conditioning units for senior citizens and care facilities in the South. So what purpose do they serve other than to ruin this beautiful experience of life, of nature, full sensory experience? Remember, your toes are in the water, in the sand. You're smelling the fresh morning air and the salt, the tint of salt in the seawater, but the fresh, look how fresh and clean it looks there. You're hearing the sound of the waves and the birds. You're seeing the beautiful sunrise. Okay? You could almost taste the salt, But I mean, that's it. It's a full immersion in, right, of a full life existence on this planet. And like I was starting to say, even if that's not your thing, and you might say, well, I'm not a big person for the shore, or I live so far, I live in the Midwest, I could never make it out to the shore. I wish I could. But you might have the same experience looking out over a meadow or a lake or, or rolling hills, right? The people who hike or people who, who are mountain climbers, or some people like to snow and to ski and snowboard, right? And they have the same type of experiences. They get to the top of a mountain, they look out, it's like beautiful, it's gorgeous. They breathe the fresh air, clean, cold, fresh air. They enjoy that. And then they get on their snowboard and they head down, and the snow's, kicking back in their face, and they're just a beautiful, fun, enjoyable experience, human experience, into the mystic. Because that's what it is, really. There's no science there. We don't need a computer chip to change a sunrise. And that's why they do all this fear mongering. They say, oh, climate. It's like that picture was just taken like a month or so ago. You see, they keep trying to tell us these things, right? But I can show you pictures from all over the United States. I could show you pictures. I mean, for crying out loud, I could show you pictures from my backyard. Greenery, right? You know? The thing about it is, there's all this talk. All these people are trying to fearmonger. I don't know how I keep getting somehow my cat picture. Well, there's the sun, the beautiful sun that could be our demise. But you know what I'm talking about. And not to mention that if you're in a relationship and you're in love, or if you just have good friends, but if you're in a relationship and, you know, the beauty of sharing a body, you know, is like, well, it's a mystical experience in and upon itself. And there are moments when, you know, when two people intertwine, that they become one. And that's no difference than a religious experience for someone who's, you know, deeply religious, or someone who meditates, or someone that's caught up in that sort of singular focus on, you know, something greater than themselves. And what that experience, you know, is like mystical. It's a mystical experience. And so I pose to you, as I, you know, proposed yesterday, that the greatest times of your life, the best you've ever felt, or the best you will ever feel if you haven't yet had that experience, will not be attached to any of this tech. You could have fun playing a video game. You could have fun with VR and AR. You could have fun doing something goofy with your iPhone. Like I had that goofy face I put up before. Even this mystical face was kind of fun creating this weird thing. It's like, that's me, but like, wow, that's weird. You know, it's like, but it's the idea. It's not the immersive experience that you have right now. So even though you may be watching this thing on a computer or on your, I hope not on a smartphone, because the miniaturization, I just can't imagine this translating, miniaturizing. The sun is starting to rise. You can see camera 2 and the lights flashing. That means it's the last. Yeah, they usually do that right before the sun, as the sun rises. But that you're still immersed in a room somewhere, and you still are free to go outside and look. At nighttime, if you could find a place where you could look up at stars and see yourself in perspective, that's a mystical experience, the wonder of the universe, the cosmos. Right? And these people, as I started before, that have come before us, you know, these ancient civilizations, as we call them, the people who had the same minds as we did, who had the similar thoughts, who still made love, right? They fell in love, they conversed, they did things, and they built things. Who knows how they built some of the things they did. They went on journeys, adventures, watched the sunrise and sunset, planted things, ate good foods, had fun, laughed, cried, right? You know, they didn't have smartphones or the latest NVIDIA chip or the Mac Max Ultra or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things, but you have to put them in perspective. They are tools. They are tools. They are communications tools. And we should use them as such, but not be dependent upon them. just the same as those people who are politicians or news personalities, like I also often bring up. These people who end up being marionettes of these corporate interests that I call the corporatocracy or the technocracy, as you might call it. Those people are just doing the bidding of basically lobbyists, of people who have an agenda, a narrative, right? And so they have a job and they want to keep that job, so they do what they do. They may not be, they may not be this, pushing hypocrisy for profit, though many are. But nonetheless, they want to hold on to their house and they want their children to have a decent education and they want to have a car. They don't want to be homeless. I don't blame all of the bureaucrats and all of the news media and all these people. I mean, I wish they were stronger willed, because I think if enough people, if enough people would stand up in unison, or together and say, hey, this is wrong. I'm not going to lie on TV, right? See, it's very easy for them to fire one person who stands up and says, well, no, I'm not going to read that thing you have on the teleprompter. I know that's not true. Yeah, I can understand one person, because why would they want to lose a job? Half of these people that are on the air are making 6, 7, some make 8 figures. Sorry for cleaning off the mustache. Like I say, this is technically the fourth time I've kind of done this show. So far, so good. Knock on wood. If it breaks down or does something, I think I've gotten a lot of the points I wanted to make through, but let's just try to clarify better. I think all humans have within them the power, because consciousness is an existential thing, that your mind is something else, that you have the ability to focus on things and to affect positive change. And I think that positive change can be something for you or people you care about, even maybe an animal, a pet or whatever. And I think as some religious people and other people who are maybe not aligned to an organized religion, so whether it's a prayer or meditation, it's the idea, the concept still of this: whenever 2 or more people gather in my name. You might have heard that line, depending on what your background is. And the idea that the more people who focus on something, that there is truly an energy that can be released. Now, science, I'm sorry about this. Facial hair is a weird thing, I'm itchy. I'm drinking coffee. Gets in your mustache. But the more people that focus on something positive, I believe that positive things can happen. And even if you're not part of a community or a group that may well all focus on something positive, it's the idea of thinking positive. If you allow yourself to be depressed, if you allow yourself to be overwhelmed by things, I mean, we all are overwhelmed, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of being human. We're overwhelmed, and sometimes we're overwhelmed with grief because things happen. Life is short, and that's that means that we grieve. We have relationships that fall apart, and that's also a grieving process in many instances. People lose their jobs. People, you know, are have health matters that issues that cause them to live restricted lives, not do what they want to do. I'm fighting off like this. They want to take out my gallbladder. So it's like I've been eating a diet that isn't exactly my ideal diet. I think I'd like to just sit down and have a bowl of ice cream with some sprinkles on top. But dairy and stuff supposedly isn't good for that. So they say. I don't know. It's so hard to find the answers. And that's what I say brings us back to science. So all of these scientists, right? Medical professionals, they're scientists, right? These are chemists, biologists, right? The people who work for these organizations, they consider themselves scientists, right? Wasn't it that the guy who's in charge of the whole plague thing, he said, if you criticize me, you're criticizing science itself, right? So they're scientists. But these organizations are not doing anything for the quality of life. They're not improving the quality of life. They haven't cured anything. You see? They've prolonged and they've treated and they make hundreds of billions of dollars. But are they, the question is, are they motivated to just create that one thing that will put it to bed? No. Why are they putting all of these carbs and sugars into our diet and telling us that these things are healthy? Why are 40,000 people a week dying, literally dying, of heart-related, weight-related, diabetes-related, kidney-related, things that have to do with diet, right? Or the manner in which we've structured our societies where people are basically stuck indoors during the best hours of the day or something. That would be a hard one to change, I know. But still, you could scratch that one out. The diet alone, okay, is just bad. And so that's science today. And so what does science give us? Well, science says, in return for shortening your lifespan by a couple of years and having you lose loved ones and maybe your own life or having health issues, we're going to give you a smartphone. And that smartphone, if you buy it next year, it's going to have a faster chip in it. And your voice assistant at home, right, is going to have a faster chip connected to the cloud. And you'll be able to get even, a better music selection, or it'll be able to tell you with accuracy, what you need to order, your smart refrigerator, what you're low on grass-fed butter. So what? I'm all for it. I love it. Look at me. I'm a tech geek, right? I've got all this stuff here, like, crazy stuff. Speaking of which, that's the kind of stuff that, we're wasting our taxes on, right? And we have people in office that could probably get on the phone and put an end to a war with a phone call. Too much pressure from the lobbyists, from the war profiteers. Just like there's too much pressure from big ag, the people who, want to put these, genetically modify a seed so that the pesticide is now in the seed so they don't have to spray the stuff anymore. or big pharma that wants to make hundreds of billions of dollars treating something instead of curing it. Well, if you cured it, then we'd be out of business. Now, that may or may not be true, and I hope it's not, but it sure seems like it is, doesn't it? Right? Sure seems like it is. It doesn't seem as if science has the will to improve the human condition, the quality of life. And so ultimately, it's, I guess, the takeaway from this is that it's up to us. It's up to you and me to enjoy, whatever it is. I don't even want to get into that. That's someone who's not nice. That's a neighbor I have that is, may well have poisoned my yard. That's another story. Watch my other videos if you want to know that story. I don't want to get into that. I want to ruin a beautiful sunrise. Where's the science here? Oh, but there's 0.004 CO2 in the atmosphere and blah, blah. Yeah, you've been harping on that for 20, 25, 30 years. And before that, you were telling us the world was we were heading for a new ice age, but then you changed it, and then it was global warming, and now it's climate change. Well, what is it? Right? Because it seems when I look out my backyard, it looks the same. And I see some, beautiful blue skies. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had a couple nice days. I actually got sun on my face. I even got some color, right? Because we're at that time. It actually is spring now. So, even in some of the northern latitudes, you can actually you have to spend more time out there, but you can actually get vitamin D3 from the sun now. It's just in the winter months you can't in certain areas. But if I go to the shore, I could probably see this right now. And if I go into the mountains, I can see beautiful green trees, and smell that smell of the forest. Right? I could go to certain areas and find a brook, a little waterfall, an area where, it's magical. And what do people do when they do that? And even that guy, is a friend of mine, by the way, takes a picture of it with the smartphone. You know what I do when I encounter that stuff? And I do take pictures sometimes. I have an Instagram account where I try to keep a log of my garden. But you know what else I do? I also have a garden planning record. This is like for 2 years, 2022 as well. And I keep records of like what I've planted, when, and what the temperature was and stuff. And sometimes, oddly enough, I compare it to like what the historical records are, the previous year. And I find out that they fudged the numbers. That the real weather was different than it was. I don't know what that game is, too. They really play around with that. The point is, believe your eyes, believe your ears, believe your experience, believe the people you know. Don't believe some stranger on a network television show who's getting paid $20,000 a year to be an anchor and who's got some chip on their shoulder or is just playing you because they know that that's going to keep you tuned in during the commercial breaks. And that's how they make their salary. It's like the people who say, we got to take out your gallbladder because maybe they make $40,000, $80,000 on that operation. Instead of saying, well, maybe if you eat this diet or take this, or we could probably give you something because we know that they're made of cholesterol or bilirubin. I know everything about this stuff. I even have the DivCom and some other software that actually, because I had a CT scan, that I actually can view the 3D 3D of my abdomen and see it. You know, I've done so much research on it because my own doctor, when I asked my doctor to do it, she said, I wouldn't know what to look for. You know, I asked a pharmacist about a certain thing someone said would help out. And she said, well, it's kind of like a homeopathic thing. I don't think it would do any harm, but, you know, that's what she said. So you always go to the source. I don't like go to the internet because if you go to the internet, one thing will say, take this will cure it. Then you'll read the next one down below. Don't take that. That's the worst thing you could possibly take, you know, whatever. Forget the internet. Ask your doctor, ask your pharmacist. You know, that's what I always do. But they're just the same sometimes. So you have to kind of like become your own. I had to get the software to look at my own CT scan. I needed to see it. But the point is, what I'm trying to say, using this as an example, because I'm using myself as a first-hand example, that if you know the composition of a thing, so in other words, if a gallstone is composed of cholesterol, say for example, you're telling me that they can't come up with something that can like target that specific thing and dissolve it, right? Or that they can't do something like they used to do in the old days. They used to use sonic things to like kind of blast these kinds of things. It's the same with they used to do with kidney stones. They used to blast them. I had a kidney stone thing where they did something like that, but they had to send a tube in to do it. But they did it. That's what they did. Ultimately, they basically like went up, you know, ran this thing up that had a camera, a vacuum, and some kind of blaster thing on it. And so they had to blast this stone, but they were monitoring on the camera, and then while it's vacuuming the pieces so that these pieces didn't get, you know, complicate matters. Of course, I had cancer, and I had to have a radical prostatectomy. I had to have my prostate removed because I got cancer. That was a couple of years ago. And, you know, why are there 600,000 minimum people a year die of cancer in this country? 650,000 people die of heart diseases. Right? These numbers just keep going up. And that's my point I'm trying to say. It's not like I'm anti-science in a sense of anti-anything. I'm not a Luddite anti-technology. I love technology. I'm using technology. I am surrounded by technology. But they're only tools. All right? And science itself is basically something that's only come around in the past couple hundred years. But humanity's been around this time around for close to 12,000 years. And so we're to say that all of those people who were just like us, exactly like us, that's very important for you to understand. They were exactly like us. They had minds exactly the same as us. You know, these conquistadors and these colonialists, they don't want us to think that. They want us to think, oh, these were people that, you know. No, they had the same brain. They were the same human. Okay? I told you before, anthropologists, they keep pushing it back. We don't know how many, you know, humans may have been human for millions of years for all we know. You know, sometimes they say, oh, 300,000 years. But I've heard anthropologists say 1,000,000 years. We don't know. This planet's 4.5 billion years old, we believe. That over that, you know, vast expanse of time, say just in the last billion years when life was possible, that there couldn't have been another period of, say, interglacial period of, say, 12,000 years when another culture could have risen, civilization could have risen and even been more advanced than we are? And maybe instead of maybe focusing so much just on communications technology the way we are today, they may have had that. It's a good thing. I like it. But maybe they focused on other things that were more mystical. You know, maybe that's how they move those 100-ton rocks, right? Pieces of stone, right? And built those things. And maybe those things were their versions of machines. Maybe they were more into the organic. Maybe they were more into the mystic in the sense of how the cosmos and the universe and the solar system and our sun and planet works. Maybe they were more aware of electromagnetic fields and saw the universe as an electromagnetic, right? An electric universe. And understood things like plasma discharges and different things and saw things in a different way. And maybe we're more connected and more open. You know, if your brain isn't clouded, remember, we put children into schools right after maternity leave, and they stay in school through high school into college. The first 25 years of their life almost, right? They're basically involved in some kind of indoctrination. And when they come out, the Department of Education is saying, you know, 1/5 of them are functionally illiterate. Another 1/5 of the people coming out of like high school or close to 1/5 of high school can't read or have, you know, such poor reading skills. Basically they can't read. I mean, you put that together, you're talking about 40%, and the government always lowballs. Maybe half the people in this country are functionally illiterate. But like so clouded, and then we're clouded with television and we're clouded with technology in certain areas. You know, people obsessed. There was somebody I was watching. I was walking back from the store the other day, and there was somebody on the sidewalk. They almost ran into me because they were completely looking down at their cell phone. And I don't live. This isn't New York City. I live in the outskirts of town. Like it's a street. It's an old neighborhood. You know. So who knows with a clear-headed mind, right? Someone thinking, you know, in terms of, you know, the beauty of nature and having that clear ability, what someone would come up with. The potential, the human potential of our consciousness being one, you know, interconnected. You know, who knows? Remember, the theory of relativity is a theory. The Big Bang theory is a theory. You know, Darwinism, the theory of evolution, is a theory. You know, as much as you want, you know, as much science you want to put behind it, they're still theories. You know, it's not considered fact, right? I mean, some people will say that. So what's to say that in this new age of science, right, the past couple hundred years, with these theories of things, that in the 10,000 years prior, those things are all, oh, that's just mythology. That's just myths. They're building temples. They were worshiping the sun or something. 10,000 years versus several hundred years. I tend to go with the 10,000 years, especially knowing that those people had the exact same brain as you and I. I don't think they were that, they weren't, unintelligent. Do you understand that? Excuse me. Because that's a problem. That, there's this general assumption. And they show these people and they think, oh, they were, these people were primitive. Look at this. Look at these Mayans. Look at the Incas. Look at these American Indian natives here, Native Americans wearing loincloths or something like that. They must have been primitive. Maybe they were just hot. You know? You know what I mean? Maybe fashion wasn't exactly like, on their mind. And maybe that was fashionable. Right? You go to other cultures, certain Eastern cultures, and the clothing that they wore thousands of years ago was actually more elaborate than the clothes we wear today. Today, people walk around T-shirts and shorts and sneakers. Well, look at some of the stuff that went on in Asia, right? They had a very elaborate clothing, which was very complex even to create. So the idea is, and they also had technology. We find bits of technology that, forbidden technology, forbidden archaeology is a book written by Cremo, was it? And I forget. Just look that up. You could find it if you want to get into that. And there's some videos. He's on some videos. Look up forbidden archaeology. But, we found technology. And people use technology, over the years. Right? The sextant that they used to use on ships to navigate. It's a pretty interesting piece of technology. Not all technology has to run on electricity and some kind of chip, right? But again, I'm not against that, right? If I had the money, I'd probably have like a better computer than I have. All right? Because, I would like to do certain things that, even though this has 16 gigabytes of RAM in it, DRAM they call it, and a quad-core processor and even an SSD drive, it still won't run the latest operating system, Apple operating system. So I'm one behind because it's like, they want you to buy a new computer. So I'm just like a year shy of being able to get the latest operating system installed or whatever. So no, I'm not against any of that. It's just that you have to put it in perspective and say that it's tools. And science doesn't have a great track record when it comes to the quality of life lately. It did 60, 50, 60 years ago when there were really some great breakthroughs to improve the life and the quality of life. But, since then, we've been a materialistic society that we have a lot of gadgetry, right? There's a lot of gadgets, Maybe some slight improvements on things, but like I also said, and I believe I said yesterday, is that when I purchased my refrigerator, when I purchased this house about 6 or 7 years ago, when I went to get a refrigerator, because I had no appliances, I just bought the house as is, didn't have a washer, dryer, or any of that stuff. So I had to buy my refrigerator, stove, washer, and dryer, the basic appliances. The guy selling me the thing said, these things only last about 5 years. You want the insurance on it? I lived in apartments before I came here, not the last apartment, but I've moved around a lot. If you know me, know my history. I've lived all over this country. I lived in LA, New York, DC, Philly, all around. But I had an apartment not that very long ago, maybe 25 years ago. And in it was one of those old white oval type top refrigerators with the tiny little freezer in it, right? And the handle you like pulled like this to open the door, right? That was the refrigerator that came with the apartment I was in. It was a nice apartment. It was a brick building and everything else was modern. But that was the refrigerator in there. And it worked. And I used to be a beer drinker in those days and used to keep my beer real cold. And I was able to get an ice cube tray in that tiny little thing. And it made ice cubes. And well, it didn't make ice cubes, but I mean, I was able to, have ice cubes when I needed them. And it kept my food and everything cold enough. And that refrigerator was from the 1960s. And that refrigerator at that point would have been like 40 years old or something like that. I have a telephone here. I could show you. Let me get rid of this thing. That still works. It's a telephone from the 60s, 70s era, right? I used to keep it by my bedside upstairs. Now I just use it as kind of a set, put a little light there, let you see it. See? There's my book codex. There's an old radio back there, right? Things that were made to last, But people don't care about that stuff anymore, They make things planned obsolescence, right? They just want to sell you something. And that's what I'm trying to say. Science is failing us in many ways. And, without getting, like I say, there are people who get like really into the mystic, in ways that are, real intense. Like this, card that I made, Some people would be afraid of that, to go to that guy, right? Other people would want to go, right? But it's me. It's just a picture of me. It's a computer effect, right? Which again, I have no problem using a computer for that kind of thing, right? There's my camera 2 up there, and I have camera 3 that I could put up, and camera 4 if I also want to put up. I use technology. I've got motion detectors in my backyard, around my garden, and all that stuff. I've got a solar fountain in my little pond in the back, and I have, I could show you here. I have a solar panel. If you look to the upper left-hand corner, you see a solar panel on that mini greenhouse back there. This picture is actually 2 years old. So actually this yard has actually been improved greatly since then. But no, I mean, and I have great solar stuff. And behind me here, this title card, this thing here, this is called the Jackery, which I sell on that through Great Solar Stuff. It's a power backup, and that's what's controlling the on-air light up here. And if you watch my shows in December, when I used to have all the holiday lights and Christmas lights and stuff around, and that's a music picture. We get into pop culture here on this show sometime. That was a show, that was a picture about Jennifer Connelly in a music video by, what was the name of the band? Jeez, it was only like 2 or 3 shows ago. Space Age Love Song or something like that. I forget. Flock of Seagulls tune. But anyway, I think that's it. I think I made my point and just to recap real quickly, it's like you've got a human body, right? And you've got these senses. And maybe it's time to think more, into the mystic and look at the wonder of the universe, of our existence, and the power that we have this through our senses that can coexist with this so-called science, world, this information technological world. The focus that seems to be mostly on communications technology is really what it is. But life is more than that. And, and while these communication aids are great, there's still nothing better than being there in person, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we need to move towards that. And the biggest failure of science is the quality of life, is the fact that too many people are living lives of quiet desperation or are ill or are dying. And that science really should focus on that. And I wish big tech would focus more on, instead of worrying about building a better and faster smartphone or a chip for some cloud communications through AI that ultimately will be used more to sell a product through an Echo device, an Echo Dot, or to you for customer service, right? That still doesn't give you an answer anyway. That still doesn't help you because that they would focus on the quality of life and our health and longevity. But unfortunately, that's something that we are going to have to take control of. Because it seems right now that all that the powers that be are concerned about are endless wars, right? How many, and diseases, treatment of things instead of cures. Genetically modifying things instead of just giving, instead of providing food, runaway inflation, getting rid of, trying to outlaw, fuels that will heat and cool people and that would charge the batteries. Watch yesterday's show. I mean, in some of my previous shows where I try to explain this, you can't put up another windmill without a crane that takes diesel fuel. You can't build a bridge without melting a steel girder and then somehow positioning that girder. You can't fix roads without excavators, dump trucks, and bulldozers. And do you see what I mean? So we need to have some kind of logic here, some kind of sensibility, because there's just, in the world that we live in right now, science seems to be running amok and there seems to be mass insanity. And so it's looking more that those who are involved in, the mystical, what they call the mystical, because that would be, anti-science in their minds, though I don't feel I'm anti-science. I think in many ways, I think I'm a scientist. I function as a scientist. I do, So anyway, think about those things. I know I've thrown a lot of stuff out there and maybe it's been, a little all over the place at certain times, but that's because the show got off to this is take 4. It's crazy. Anyway.
Good morning.
Have a great day. All right? Go to ROCKFLUX.com. I believe it's the last day or next to the last day where you get free shipping on my hoodies, T-shirts, hats, all that kind of stuff. Fish around there. Click on the link to the store and look under accessories. Get something. I only make about 50 cents. I don't make any money on YouTube. I'm not monetized. And same with Great Solar stuff. Most of that stuff is just, we'll give you the links to things that I've tested that are for sale on Amazon. But I highly recommend you get some kind of power backup system. Some of them start as cheap as a couple $100. Because we have a grid that's in really bad shape. That's another thing science isn't focusing on, is the grid system that's likely to go down and goes down all the time. Otherwise, these are my most recent books. Then What is most recent. Codex was right before that. I recommend the print versions, and there's links for those on rockflux.com as well. I've written 10 books. I've 50 songs. My songs are available everywhere music can be listened to. You can ask your voice assistant to play songs of Tony Caravan. You could ask Apple Music, Siri. You can find it on Spotify. I've got 1,000 videos, at least 400 almost consecutive from the past year or so on YouTube. They're also available on Rumble, a day late, $1 short. But check it out. I'd appreciate the support. To date, to be honest with you, nobody's supporting me. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know if that's because they're shadow banning me or what the story is. Anyway, take care. All the best. Cheers. I'll talk to you soon.